Hello everybody, I am the Dire Duck. When discussing murder drones, there are many theories and debates about different parts of the show that often spring up, with the community spending a lot of time going back and forth on all of them. We have seen a lot of these throughout the show's run, from the old who killed Nori, to whether Tessa was really Sin, from who would die in the finale, to everyone's favourite topic, the shipping wars. There are a lot of things to debate about, especially when the show isn't always forthcoming with its information. However, despite this, a lot of the long-standing debates that I mentioned previously have ultimately been settled clearly by the show itself. However, this isn't always the case. So today, we're going to be talking about one of these seemingly ongoing debates, being the big question of whether Sin and the Absolute Solver are different entities. Are they distinct, or are they simply just different names to describe the same being? Where does Sin end and the Solver begin? Well, that's what we're going to be discussing today. We will be breaking down the appearances of Sin and the Absolute Solver, work out whether or not they are separate entities, and finally discuss the lore implications of all this and any other theories or missed opportunities. But before we begin, remember to assimilate that like button and collapse the core of that subscribe button, as each one delays the inevitable destruction of Earth by a single day. So, let's begin by looking at the appearances of both Sin and the Solver, and how the show categorizes them. Some certain details are established for us. For example, the administrator for disassembly drones is listed to be Sin before Uzi overrode it. Sin also seems to be the colloquial name that most of the cast uses when referring to any form of the Solver/Sin. Especially V, who is seen doing this the most.
New body, same horrors. Huh, Sin? Anything to screw Sin's plan. Working with Sin!
The in-law reason for this is likely because N, V, and J all knew the Solver as Sin, so they would have just kept calling it that, even if it wasn't really Sin anymore. The practical reason is probably because it's easier to simply refer to all versions as Sin rather than the
Absolute Solver?
Solver of the absolute fabric, the void, the exponential end.
Solver! The Solver's found its way back to finish the job.
It's less of a mouthful and would fit better in the credits now, wouldn't you say? Speaking of the credits, if we refer to them to judge who is Sin and who is the Absolute Solver, then every speaking appearance is credited as the Absolute Solver, with the exception of episode 5, where Fitz is credited both as Sin and the Absolute Solver. Which is presumably because Sin as a worker drone shows up alongside the mini Solver in the basement that Uzi ends up possessing, suggesting that the only time that is considered Sin is in episode 5. But it's likely that's just because the cast calls them Sin, so it makes more sense to credit Fitzy as Sin. Though V does refer to the Solver as Sin in episode 8, but Fitzy is still credited as the Solver. So, now for the answer to the big question, the one you've all likely been waiting for. Are the Solver and the Sin two separate entities, or just one? Now, I could drag things out and run through all the evidence on each side of the argument before giving my verdict, but I won't waste your time and will simply just give the answer right now. Are Sin and the Solver different entities? The answer is yes, but actually no. Okay, let me explain. While yes, it is confirmed in the show that Sin and the Solver are distinct entities, we can see this at the beginning of episode 5, with the reboot text that briefly appears on the drone in the corpse pile. The text shows the Solver talking to Sin, saying how it will not discard her, and asking to be granted access. We know that this drone is Sin, as we can see their name on the armband. So in this instance, we can see that the Solver came to Sin, offered to save them, only then to take her as presumably its first host. Now, if that's the case, why do they add the actually no then at the end of my sentence? Well, while yes, Sin and the Absolute Solver are distinct entities, they might as well not be, as we never get to see any of the real Sin at any point throughout the show. We don't know what her personality was, we don't know what her hopes and dreams were, we don't know why she was discarded to begin with, or why she even accepted the Solver's help in the first place. She is basically a nothing character, unfortunately. So Sin and the Solver might as well be the same thing. I mean, we know more about Doll's dad than we do Sin, and Doll's dad doesn't even have a bloody name. So that's it then. Mystery solved. Pack up everyone, let's go home, it's all over, nothing to see here. Well, that would be a pretty boring way to end the video now, wouldn't it? So allow me to do what I do moderately well, and get to theorizing, as there are some interesting questions raised by this information that we can speculate on. So, the first and probably biggest question, what actually happened to Sin? Think about it. With every other host of the Solver that we see on screen, the original host personality still resides within the body and can reassert control of their form when the Solver is either removed or with enough strength from the host themselves. We see this both with Nori and Uzi, so the question remains, where is Sin? Surely there are multiple opportunities throughout the show where Sin could have re-emerged, even if only for a brief second. Now, as seen in episode 5, it appears that the Solver is capable of having multiple copies of itself operating simultaneously, which would explain why Sin didn't retake control of the testing body while Uzi was being possessed. Though, that doesn't really explain why the Solver wouldn't have simply gotten back up in Tessa while Uzi was possessed to fight En and Nori in a 2v2. And if it did do that, the Solver could have won right there and then. But that also doesn't explain some of the other instances, like near the Solver's death at the end of episode 8. It would have been a great time for Sin to re-emerge then if it was able to do so. Regardless, we know that Sin should still be in there, which also raises some more questions about how the Solver works. Are the hosts conscious of what is happening during their possession? It sort of seems like they are, based on the fact Uzi was able to demonstrate that she heard Nori's critique of her after En claimed that they were dating, to the point where she was able to retake control of her form and punt Nori into the void. But there might also be other things at play as well. Though, if there isn't, then that means that Sin was conscious throughout the events of the entire show. Think about that. She was conscious of all the events of episode 5, the constant torture and experimentation that the Solver inflicted on En and the rest of the worker drones at the manor. She witnessed the Gala massacre itself and the slaughter of Tessa. She witnessed the Solver then wearing Tessa's skin over her original form. She then witnessed the fall of Earth and the entire events of the show. She was there, watching the final battle in the finale, before eventually being put out of her misery when her body melted away and the core likely contains her mind is vaporized by the sun. That is a pretty horrifying existence to suffer through, all one way you're not able to do anything but watch as your hands and mouth move on their own, dancing to someone else's tune, performing actions that you're powerless to stop, until the nightmare finally ends with the sweet release of death, with you being able to at least rest easy knowing that while you may die, your jailer and torturer will finally face justice for all their crimes. Except, no. The Solver now just gets to chill out on Uzi's tail, not taking anything seriously at all, and not even really being punished at all in the grand scheme of things. It's pretty wild, isn't it? After all is said and done, the Solver gets to live, but Sin doesn't. There is no happy ending for them, no freedom from their subjugation. Sin only faces oblivion, a character who we never really got to truly know, and who never really had a chance at life. So, why are Nori and Uzi able to retain their personalities and re-emerge from the Solver's control, while Sin can't? Well, there are a couple possible explanations. The first is that Sin had been fully consumed by the Solver after spending so much time being possessed. It would make a lot of sense and be a good way to explain away a lot of the inconsistencies, while making Sin's fate a little bit less depressing, being a small mercy that she's not trapped in her body for the whole of the show's events. Another possible explanation might be that because Uzi and Nori both possess the Solver, they are able to prevent themselves getting fully consumed by the Absolute Solver, and it being the main thing that gives them the strength to be able to resist its influence and allow them to break free in the first place. This would make sense, as after all, we literally see Uzi use her Solver power to resist the possession in episode 8, so we know it's a thing. Finally, it could be that Sin and the Solver personalities fuse together, which might explain the Solver's, well, quirky personality, though this seems to be the least likely option, to be honest. So, what could have Glitch done differently with Sin? Well, they could have used the flashbacks in episode 2 and 5 to establish Sin as an actual character first, before having the Solver overtake them. This will allow for the character dynamics of the cast in a manner to be more strongly established, and make the change in Sin's behaviour more stark for the viewer, as we were actually able to witness Sin's behaviour before and after being possessed, so we are more able to juxtapose them. It would also give the Solver a bit more depth as a character, with us actually getting to see how they interact with Sin, maybe even allowing us to glean a bit more into their motives. A lot could be done with this in just a couple of small scenes. Finally, it would add more of a tragic dimension to the events of the show, with us actually getting to know and form a small connection with Sin before they end up getting puppeted around by the Solver. This would make the Solver seem like more of the evil and insidious threat that it really is, while adding a lot more tension to Uzi's possession scenes, as we already have a taste of what Uzi's fate could be. Though, when all is really said and done, and when you start to really think about it, Sin was clearly intended to just be a mere plot device from the very start. A way of getting the Solver into the show and give it a physical form. Sin was never meant to be a character outside of the Solver's possession. So, just like I said earlier on, Sin and the Solver are distinct entities, but in all practicalities and by the writer's intent, no, they really aren't. You may see this as a missed opportunity, but you must also remember, Murder Drones is a show that already has a lot going on at once, with there being many other plot points and characters that are never fully realised. So, could the show really afford to cram Sin in as a proper character as well? Most likely not. So, I guess the question now is, would it have been worth cutting other elements of the show to make room for Sin? I guess that's for you to decide. But at the end of the day, this is what fan projects are for. They allow their creators to give new life to underused characters and expand the world building of the show. But what do you think? Let me know in the comments section below. Anyway, that'll be all from me. Remember to like and subscribe and do all the other things that every other YouTuber tells you to do. I would really appreciate it. And yeah, check out my other videos, some of which are even good. Probably. Finally, I hope to see you all again very soon. Bye bye.